Greetings, it's Philip Bateman here. If we haven't met before, I'm a strategy and investor relations consultant and founder of Bravo Charlie. And thank you to the GSG for the opportunity to get this in advance and present to you the State of Play report, released a few hours ago by the Impact Taskforce, the ITF. Now I'm going to take you through the shifts and progress since the inception of the task force, explore its two main themes, discuss the path forwards, and look at some success stories in mobilising domestic pools of capital for impact. Now these remarks are a mix of my own opinion and quotes from the report, so do make sure to download and read it yourself, as there's much more in it than I'm speaking to here. Now the Impact Taskforce was set up in response to the 2021 United Kingdom's G7 Presidency's mandate, and its two core themes are impact transparency and capital mobilisation for a just transition. Its focus is to answer the questions: how can we accelerate the volume and effectiveness of private capital seeking to have positive social and environmental impact? As well as, how do we make sure this mobilisation has a real impact and reaches the people and places that need it most? Pretty commendable goals. Now, if you're not familiar with the ecosystem, or you recognise the need to act in alignment with these goals, dig into the contributing organisations I've linked to in the video description, ask what you can do to leverage or further their work in your endeavours. Now, in my own role as a strategist for CEOs and leadership teams, and then supporting them to communicate that strategy effectively to their investors and stakeholders, I'll also provide a few questions for your reflection as we go. If you haven't read the original Time to Deliver report, it's a useful starting point, as it details that challenging system inertia was best done through a roadmap to full impact transparency, underpinned by mandatory accounting for impact. Now, to this mandatory accounting point, in my recent video with Sir Ronald Cohen from our time together at the GSG Summit, he spoke to the work of the International Foundation for Valuing Impact, and that we are collectively on the threshold of a paradigm shift in our economic system. As he put it, within 2 to 3 years, companies will be mandated in some countries to publish impact statements that show their revenues, their costs, and their impact. His conviction was that when this happens, the whole economic system will shift, that consumers, talent, investors, and government will know what companies are delivering positive impact. The Time to Deliver report also called for the increase of appropriate opportunities to invest for impact. Now, this balance of the will on one hand and the relevant pipeline on the other is a tension I've seen throughout my working life. This past year alone, whether I've been at events for the World Ocean or the Global Wind Energy Councils, the Global Entrepreneurship Network, or the Climate Investor Forum, early stage companies focused on impact at scale struggle to be viable as anything close to institutional opportunities. Now, if you're a leader of a growing company watching this, it's a great time to ask whether the people who need to clearly understand who you are and where you're going, and if they see you to the same degree of significance that you see yourself. Now, the banner headline of the report is, "The year 2024 must be pivotal." And this is set against the reality that we've had significant changes in geopolitical and macroeconomic landscapes. And what that's meant is public sector debt has risen and private sector appetite for risk has arguably fallen. To quote the executive summary, there will never be enough public money to close an annual funding gap of at least $4 trillion in emerging markets and developing economies, EMDEs as they're called. And the call for 2024 is that collectively we find more effective ways to mobilize incremental percentages of the estimated $270 trillion in global financial wealth to deliver real impact where it's needed most. So 4 trillion as a percentage of 270. It's not a lot, but it's still a lot. It's trillions of dollars. The report details the milestones reached by the International Financial Reporting Standards, the IFRS, and the ISSB, and I'll add a nod to the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures and the more recent nature-related financial disclosures, as I did a deep dive on these with David Carlin, who's the head of climate risk from the United Nations a few months ago, and you can check that out via the relevant links. Now, as I present this to you, COP28 finished yesterday, and that came with the usual mix of diametrically opposed statements in the press. But what I saw through contacts on the ground was a much more considered and nuanced discussion about change. Now, clearly, any hope of meeting a 1.5 degree warming target is no longer relevant, though this does sit amidst a backdrop of passing the first anniversary of the US Inflation Reduction Act, the response of the European Green Deal Industrial Plan in February, which I've seen referenced as a bit of a Faustian bargain, And my home country of Australia's stagnation in response has been shelved until 2024. So that pivotal year, there's a lot to do soon. I say this to introduce the next banner headline, which is that alignment behind a common roadmap is essential. The report calls for a common framework for private capital mobilisation, which can support the Sustainable Development Goals and climate goals. It wants actionable pathways and KPIs that emerging markets and developing economies and private investors can rely on. As I mentioned, do read the report in detail. There's so much more than I can reasonably present to you here. Though now I want to focus on there being evidence of growing demand for investments that deliver positive impact. Fund managers are continuing to raise institutional capital for impact. We have Just Climate at 1.5 billion, Leapfrog at 1 billion, KKR at 2.8 billion for their second fund. There's definitely positive movement. In the next week or so, you're going to see the launch of the revised narrative and brand for Australian impact investments. And through leading this project, I've been able to confirm with the team, with wealth managers and family offices, not only their deep belief in impact measurement, but also that they have 100% impact-aligned portfolios, and that they're not taking any kind of concessional return to do so. The truth is that business that is good for people and the planet makes sense, and dollars and euros, and haha. Now, there are some excellent key recommendations in the report, and one I'd add to this list is to ensure that you've identified the stakeholders you're going to lean on and support to make structural change. Give them what they need to easily articulate that change amongst their peers and the value it's going to bring them personally and collectively. Because this is complex work and everybody's got competing priorities, so how easy can we make it for people to say yes? There's a focused update on impact transparency in the report, noting Asia leading the way with specific initiatives from Australia, Japan, Hong Kong, South Korea. And if you're wanting a bit of a softer entry for new associates to all the terminology and acronyms and context for all of this, consider them giving our No More Greenwashing guide, which I released earlier this year. Speaking to a renewed call for action, the report outlines the building blocks of impact accounting. And this graphic, which is a note to those listening to the audio version of this, speaks to the imperative of our move into a transformative era of convergence. Together, we are on a journey to reshape the landscape of finance and governance and place impact at the core of decision making, so we can shift into a paradigm of risk, return, and impact. Now, this might seem a bit dry to some, though I think it's pretty cool, and I hope you do too. The report includes an overview of the international climate finance reform agenda, as well as some excellent examples of outcome partnerships in the Next Frontiers section: Australia, Colombia, Nigeria, the World Bank, Education Outcomes Funds. Now, outcome partnerships are endeavours seeking to improve the effectiveness of public spending by building on existing knowledge, fostering innovation in delivery and funding, and improving the provision of governmental social services. Now, these aren't new, though they aren't widely adopted. And on the basis private groups can prove things work and go on to deliver outcomes that hit KPIs and thus get funded by governments, it ensures money goes where it makes an impact, and pretty good stuff. There are inspiring stories in the annex, and as I regularly do, I'll mention Catherine Clark and Duke University's free impact measurement and management for the SDGs course for any of your team that haven't done it yet. Now, before I close, if you're leading an organization within this space, I'd appreciate hearing from you and learning about your vision for this pivotal year ahead of us. Your time, impact, and legacy are such valuable things. I grew up watching the TV station close late at night on a Thursday. I'd watch Star Trek: The Next Generation with my dad, and as a 12 or so year old, the last thing I would hear was what happened in the market today. I never understood then how a financial market based on infinite growth could exist on our finite planet, and 30 years later I still don't, though it feels like change is in the wind. This brings me to quoting the close of the report, which I'm deeply grateful is so well articulated. We have polished the problem long enough. Common ground has been established around what needs to be done. The real pressing question, therefore, is why change is not happening with the urgency and scale of ambition required. In an increasingly challenging global environment, we cannot sit idle as system inertia in both the public and private sectors prevail, perpetuating a status quo that works against human development and pushes natural systems to the verge of collapse. To an increasing extent, high-level global dialogue is engaging with the difficult shifts required. While we are broadly supportive of the direction of travel and will continue to engage as an expert, recognized voice, our focus will be on the pragmatic things that can be done today to create a more enabling environment for mobilizing private capital for impact, demonstrating what is possible. 2024 needs to be a pivotal year for change. It is still time to deliver. Thank you for watching.